the Wage and Hour Division and from OSHA on with us today. And Vanessa, were you going to share screen or do I need to do that?
My apologies. I'll do that again. I thought you would be the one.
Thank you. No, and I'm excited to see all the folks in the chat. People are from all over the country, and that's one of the things I really love about our trainings and webinars is that we get to hear from folks in many different parts of the US who are serving farm workers. And please feel free, to have side conversations in the chat. If you see someone that you'd like to meet, you can respond to them privately and do some networking when you have the chance. Okay. Well, I'm very excited. Our structure today is we're first going to have Mr. Anthony Delgado from the Wage and Hour Division of the Department of Labor. He's going to do a presentation. We'll have about 5 minutes of question and answer time for him. And then we'll move to Ms. Yves Torres-Gillett from OSHA, and she will present. We'll have some Q&A with her. And then we're going to go into regional breakout rooms as we discuss so that there's more time for discussion and questions and answers. So it'll be a pretty interactive session today. All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Anthony now.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you see the presentation? No? Okay. I'll do it right now. Okay. What about now?
Yes.
Perfect. So first, welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Anthony Delgado. I am the Assistant District Director for the Raleigh District Office in North Carolina. The Wage and Hour Division is responsible for enforcing some of the nation's most foundational federal worker protection laws, including protections related to the federal minimum wage, overtime, child labor requirements, the Medical and Family Medical Leave Act, and agricultural protections. During today's presentation, I will discuss some of the Wage and Hour Division's agricultural worker protections. Unfortunately, given to the short amount of time that we have, our presentation will focus on some of the most common questions we receive in advance of today's training. If you or your organization would like full training on these protections or any of our laws, please reach out to our local office or community outreach specialist to organize. We have a outreach specialist in each of the 54 district offices who can assist you with your request. Now, please note that this presentation is intended as a general information and does not carry the force of legal opinion. But let's get started. When it comes to agricultural employers' compliance responsibilities, the Wage and Hour Division has launched a national initiative to focus enforcement and outreach on the agricultural industry. So all of our offices across the country are focused on agricultural workers. In fact, in fiscal year 2023, we concluded over 830 agricultural investigations. We recovered nearly $7 million in back wages for over 7,000 employees and assessed over $6.6 million in civil money penalties. When it comes to agricultural protections, there are 4 major laws governing the employment of workers in agriculture that are administered by the Wage and Hour Division. One is for example, the Fair Labor Standards Act sets the minimum wage, overtime, child labor, and record-keeping standards for agricultural workers, along with most of the workers in the U.S. Also, the Migrant Seasonal Protection Act, better known as MISPA, requires registration by fair labor contractors and sets rules governing the employment of migrant and seasonal agricultural workers. Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA, sets the field sanitation standards covering drinking water, hand washing, and toilet facilities in the field, and temporary labor camp standards for agricultural workers. And lastly, Section 218 of the Immigration and Nationality Act governs the admission and employment of temporary foreign workers in agriculture under the H-2A program. Some of the responsibilities. The H-2A program is administered by 2 agencies within the U.S. Department of Labor. ETA, the Employment Trade Administration, is responsible for the application and certification process The Wage and Hour Division has responsibility for enforcement of all contractual obligations for H-2A workers and workers in corresponding employment. What is corresponding employment? Is basically what applies to the employment of workers who are not H-2A workers by an employer who has an approved H-2A application for temporary employment certification in any work included in the job order or in any agricultural work performed by the H-2A worker. To qualify as a corresponding employment, the work must be performed during the validity period of the job order, including any approved extensions. Wage and Hour is authorized to conduct inspections and, in appropriate circumstances, impose penalties, collect back wages, seek injunctive relief, recommend revocation of existing labor certification, and debar from future participation. The job order must contain the employer's obligation. A copy of the job offer must be given to each H-2A worker no later than the time of the visa application, and to each corresponding worker no later than the first day of employment. And here you can see some of those obligations that employers have. Now we're gonna actually go in detail in some of those obligations. Disclosure of the work contract. Each worker must receive a copy of the work contract or a copy of the job order if not separate contract exists. You will need, in the contract, they must include the following: the beginning and ending dates of the contracted period, conditions of employment, whether there's requirements of lifting 50 pounds or more, they're gonna be working outside for a long period of time. It kind of tells them exactly what is expected from them. The hours of work, if they're gonna be working, how many hours they're gonna be working throughout the day, how many days they're gonna be working, the rates that will be paid under the contract, and the type of crops for which they are going to be working. Now, when it comes to the wage requirements under the H-2A, the prevailing hourly wage rate is a rate that is determined as a result of the state agency prevailing rate survey in an area and agricultural activity. The adverse effect wage rate, better known as AWAR, is the rate determined by the administrator of the ETA, the Employment Training Administration, that must be offered and paid at a minimum to every H-2A worker and every worker in corresponding employment. The pay they must be stated in the job order and cannot be less often than semi-monthly. The employer, let me say this, the employer must make deductions required by law. Any other deduction must be disclosed in the job order and must be reasonable. Employers subject to the Fair Labor Standards Act might not make deductions, which will result in payments to workers of less than the applicable federal minimum wage of $7.25, even if such deductions are disclosed in the job contract. When we talk about the 3/4 guarantee, an employer must guarantee each worker payment of a total number of hours equal to at least 3/4 of the workdays during the contract period, including all extensions. This includes all hours offered, even if refused by the worker, up to the number of daily hours specified in the job order. An employee is not required to work more than number of specified daily hours on federal holidays or on employee Sabbath. To count as hours offered, the employer must offer full number of hours work hours per workday as specified in the job order. The employer may count all hours actually worked by the employee in assessing compliance. A good example that I can tell you is, for example, a contract length of 4 weeks, and in which they're gonna be working 5 days per week, 8-hour days per day. The contract requirement is 160 hours. This is just an example. So 3/4 of 160 hours will be 100 hours, 120 hours guaranteed. The employers are obligated to comply with the 3/4 guarantee for the entire period of the contract in all instances, except an employee voluntarily leaves and the employer makes proper notification to the Employment Training Administration and the Department of Homeland Security if applicable. Employee is terminated for cause and the employer makes proper notification to ETA and DHS if applicable. And lastly, act of God, if certified as a contract impossibility by ETA certifying officer, in which the contract termination date will be the new end date for purposes of calculating the 3/4 guarantee. Now, talking about deductions from pay, the employer must provide the employee without charge all tools, supplies, and equipment required to perform assigned duties. The employer must provide at no cost to the worker insurance under the state workers' compensation law or its equivalent. The insurance shall cover injury and disease arising out of and in the course of the worker's employment with the company. Fees. Employers and their agents are prohibited from seeking or receiving payments from workers related to obtaining labor certification, including, as stated here, employers' attorney's fees and application fees. All recruitment costs, all visa-related expenses must be paid by the employer. They cannot also charge for recruitment fees, whether it's to come in for the first time in the contract or to guarantee their return to the following year with the employer. Those are prohibited fees that cannot be charged to them. Now, switching gears to housing requirements under the H-2A. An employer must provide without charge to H-2A workers and those in corresponding employment who are not reasonably able to return to the residence within the same day. The housing must be maintained during occupancy to meet the applicable safety and health standards. For employer-provided housing, the State Workforce Agency, better known as SWA, is responsible for assuring that housing is inspected prior to occupancy and that the housing meets DOL standards for safety and accuracy. Finally, the family housing must be provided to workers with families who requested it, provided it is the prevailing practice in the area of intended employment and occupation. When we talk about transportation, the employer must provide transportation between workers' living quarters and the workers at no cost to the workers. This requirement is not applicable, and it's something we need to remember, to workers who are local residents and return home at the end of each workday. Transportation safety, all the employer-provided transportation must comply with applicable federal, state, and local laws and regulation. At a minimum, this transportation must provide same vehicle safety standards, driver licensure, and vehicle insurance required under 29 CFR 500.105 and between 0.120 and 128. And we talk about license requirements. Every driver must be properly licensed to operate a vehicle being used for transporting workers. To be properly licensed, the driver must have a valid current driver's license, a commercial driver's license, CDL, if required for the vehicle, and under the Migrant Seasonal Protection Act, a doctor's certificate. The doctor's certificate is valid for 36 months. When it comes to insurance requirements, all vehicles used for transporting agricultural workers must be properly insured. Transporter must have either liability and property insurance of $100,000 per seat, not to exceed $5 million per vehicle, or workers' compensation coverage in effect with $50,000 property damage, or option B, which is obtain a liability bond from a U.S. Department of Treasury approved surety, assuring payment of any liability up to $500,000 for damages to persons or property. Now we can mention some of the common transportation problems that we see. Unfortunately, no fixed seat belts on vehicles, insufficient insurance, improper or no license for the driver, vehicle safety problems such as broken windshield, brake lights not working, bald tires, etc. And one of the main problems is overloaded vehicles have been the key factor in recent accidents and overturned vans. When it comes to field sanitation, they have to provide facilities are provided free of charge, drinking water available for an entire work period, toilet and hand washing facilities provided when working more than 3 hours, including travel time. Now that we covered some of the basic information that is extremely important to know so that you know your rights, let's talk about how to file a complaint. If a worker, this is something that we need to remember, if a worker believes their workplace rights have been violated, they have the right to file a complaint with the Wage and Hour Division. One of our goals of this outreach program is to ensure that workers know how to reach us, know how to file a complaint, and understand that the Wage and Hour Division pursues complaints regardless of the worker's immigration status. Complaints can come from different sites and areas. For example, they can be filed from employees, whether they're former or current employees. Parents or guardians can also file complaints. School officials, if they're aware of a situation related to from agricultural workers, they can file a complaint. Advocacy groups could also file complaints, and other agencies. There are wage and hour offices throughout the country with trained professionals ready to help you. Complaints are confidential, and we do not confirm that a complaint was actually filed when we conduct an investigation in the field. We enforce the law regardless of your immigration status. Is that something that I want to make sure that we all understand? If you're hardworking men and women in this country and you're performing the work, and you have to be paid in compliance with federal labor laws that are enforced by the Wage and Hour Division. There's some online resources for the workers. As you can see here, worker.gov. This site covers common workplace concerns and federal labor laws that protect you as a worker. You can go to this website and receive additional information, and actually it can lead you to our website if you want to decide to do some research and find out which is the district office closer to your state or the area where you're working, so that you can contact them and file a complaint if that is the case. Also for employers, we have employer.gov, which is a resource for employers. This is if you as an employer have questions about the role as an employer and your requirements, whether it's under H-2A, the Migrant Seasonal Protection Act, or any of the other laws enforced by the Wage and Hour, this is a good resource for you in which you can get the information that you need. If there's additional questions on how to comply with the laws, of course, you can get in touch with your local office, and they will be ready to assist you if you need any help. This is just to give you an idea how you can actually get in touch with us in the Wage and Hour Division. You have our website, dol.gov/agencies/WHD, and we're going to be sharing this contact information later after the presentation. Call our toll-free number for information, which is 1-866-487-9243, or connect with our community outreach specialist, and there's the link listed. I just want to encourage you to contact the Wage and Hour Division if you need any additional assistance. Visit our website or call the helpline, toll-free number helpline. So I just want to say that I know that I tried to provide you with a lot of information in a short amount of time, but this is just to give you a brief idea of your rights and understand that we have an amazing staff and team that is ready to assist you. And all you have to do is make the phone call if you have any questions or any concerns. We'll be there to assist you as soon as possible. And I believe with that, that's conclude my presentation, and we could move forward if there's any questions. And I believe Bethany, right?
Yeah, thank you for all of that information. And just in case folks didn't see it, we will get the slides out to everybody who attended. So we'll send those out via email. There was a few questions we wanted to highlight that people had submitted when they registered for the webinar. So one of those was if you can share any information about the Farmworker Protection Act.
Okay. Yes, the Farm Worker Protection Rule, actually, in April, the Department of Labor published a final rule that both strengthens the existing protections and provides a number of new protections to better fulfill the department's statutory duty when administering and enforcing the H-2A program, as well as includes changes that improve protections that benefit all the farm workers. These reforms include the following, just to give you an idea: new and expanded protections for workers' voice and empowerment, clarifying when a termination is for cause to protect key workers' rights, enhancing transparency in the job opportunity and foreign labor recruitment process, implementing wage changes immediately to help ensure employment of H-2A workers does not adversely affect the wages of similarly employed workers in the United States, improving transportation safety, improving protections against labor exploitation, improving program integrity, and improving protections for workers in the event of a delay in the start of the work. These changes will make a real difference to individual agricultural workers by strengthening worker protections, including improved worker voice and empowerment protections, and enhancing the department's enforcement capabilities against fraud and program violations. I must say that in August 26, 2024, the U.S. District Court of the Southern District of Georgia issued a preliminary injunction on the U.S. Department of Labor enforcement of the final rule. Improving protections for workers in temporary agricultural employment in the United States, also known as the Farm Worker Protection Rule, in the states of Georgia, Kansas, South Carolina, Arkansas, Florida, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Virginia. In light of this preliminary injunction, the Department of Labor will not implement, administer, or enforce the final rule in those 17 states. The final rule remains in force in other states. Litigation is ongoing, and the Department of Labor is collaborating with the Department of Justice to decide the next steps. The Department of Labor is committed to protecting and enforcing rights of the farm workers throughout the United States, including temporary workers employed under the H-2A program.
Thank you so much. And the other question that was submitted prior was, can H-2A workers, can they get the labor contract in a language that they can read?
Yes, the employer has to provide a copy of the job order, the contract, in the language that they can read. That's in fact the case. So if they speak Spanish, it is expected for them to receive the copy of the contract in Spanish so they can understand actually what is expected from them during the course of the employment period. So yes, indeed, it has to be in their language.
Thank you. And there, a quick follow-up question that I just saw for what you had just described, is the injunction for all aspects of the Farm Worker Protection Rule?
That's information that I will have to double check, and we can actually share it with you all later today. Okay.
That sounds good. And I'll do one last question here, and then I think we need
Definitely.
to move on. And I know that Claudia has been good about answering questions in the chat, and we can translate some of those into Spanish, some of those responses. But this last question is, are workers protected from retaliation?
Definitely. One thing that I can say is addressing retaliation against employees who assert their rights or participate in wage and hour division investigation is a critical part of our mission. When we talk about retaliation, we mean any adverse action that could discourage an employee from raising a concern about a possible violation or engaging in other protected activities, such as filing a complaint or cooperating in a wage and hour division investigation. Most people know that you cannot fire someone just for filing a complaint with the government, but there are types of retaliation. There's other types of retaliation as well, including, for example, confiscation of workers' passports or other immigration documents, threats to employees, their families, or co-workers, reduction of work hours or rates of pay, shifts changes or elimination of premium pay, and blacklisting and demotion. All of these adverse actions are considered retaliation. If, for example, upon investigation we determine retaliation occur, appropriate remedies might be pursued, including, for example, civil money penalties, injunctive relief, and or any additional remedies necessary to make sure that the employee whole as a result of the discrimination. However, because it is a behavior, it requires someone to do something against another person. So throughout awareness and training such as this one, and by empowering workers, we try to address retaliation and stop it from happening in the first place.
Thank you so much, Anthony. All right, and you Also, folks, if you have questions, you can take those into the breakout rooms, which we'll do in about half an hour. All right. Ms. Torres, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right.
Can you see it? Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ibis Torres. I'm the Compliance Assistant Specialist from the Jacksonville area office here in Florida. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about heat illness and our National Emphasis Program. Okay, this week is Labor Right Week. That's why we are doing this type of events this week, just to highlight the fundamental rights of the workers. Well, OSHA mission is to have safe and healthful working conditions free from unlawful retaliation. So how we do that? We set the OSHA standards. We enforce those standards through inspections. We enforce the anti-retaliation provisions from the OSHA Act and some federal whistleblower laws. We provide support, outreach, training, consultations services, and we ensure that state programs are at least as effective as the federal OSHA. We have reached good progress in the last 50 years, but we are not where we need to be. Why I'm saying that? In 1970, we have 38 workers' fatalities per day. In 2022, it was 14, but we still have 5,486 fatalities in 2022. That was an increase of 5% from the previous year. As an example, Florida in 2023 have 106 fatalities, 4 of them caused by heat, 2 in construction, 2 in agriculture. I'm including this information from the OSHA website so people can understand that there's employees that do not go back home to their families because of heat. We have our standards. Agriculture is covered under 1928. And we have our national emphasis program in heat since 2022. So we have the heat campaign that started in 2011, the heat initiative memo in 2021, and then the national emphasis program in 2022. And the idea is to ensure that employees in the high hazard industry, doesn't matter if it's indoor or outdoor, are protected from heat-related hazards. So we are working in coordination with Wage and Hour, and we are focused on protect vulnerable workers. So that the National Emphasis Program established a trigger heat priority day when the heat index is over 80 Fahrenheit. So we are gonna prioritize inspections in response to complaints, all employer-reported hospitalizations. And the good thing about this National Emphasis Program is each office received a list of workplaces that we need to visit to do inspections that provide a targeting mechanism for a specific high hazard industries. So how OSHA determined the high risk industries? From the Bureau Label of Statistics, high numbers or high incident rates. From the Bureau Label of Statistics, elevated numbers of days away from work. We took information from the OSHA severe injury reports that we received from employers, and we checked for the 20 years 2017 to 2021, the heat-related injury general duty clause violations and the hazard alert letters that we issue. These are the workplaces that we are gonna be conducting inspections. Outdoor, you can see agriculture is one of them. From 2015 to 2019, we have approximately 35 fatalities per year. So 2,700 cases with days away from work. Many times the heat-related fatalities are underreported because the cause of death show as a heart attack. As an example, when I was a compliance officer, I investigated a case where the person, completely a healthy person, have a heart attack, and the doctor mentioned to him, yeah, it could have been related because you were the heat exposure. An example, in Florida, we have 4 fatalities in 2023, Alabama 1. In 2022, we have 1 in Florida, 1 in Georgia, and 1 in Alabama. Many of the inspections that I did when I was compliance officer, I noticed items that were similar. First, it was a heavy physical work, high ambient heat, the day was hot, high humidity that day, and basically no cooling system, even no fans, no breeze if they were working outside. So I always recommend to the employees and to the employers, get the OSHA NEOSH Heat Safety Tool app, download that in your phone. It's gonna give you the heat index by hour, so you can organize your work. You can see what type of heat illness, you can see the symptoms, you can see there the methods of prevention, and what you need to do in case of an emergency. So how you can prevent heat illness in the workplace? We know heat is fatal. The body is unable to maintain a normal temperature. And 3 out of 4 fatalities from outdoor heat illness occur during the first week of work. So one of the things we propose is acclimatization. Acclimatize, let the body of the worker get used to the heat. New employees or returning workers should build that tolerance to the heat and take frequent breaks. Also, begin with 20% of the workload on the first day and go increasing 20% each day. In one of my inspections, in many of my inspections, the incident happened in the first 3 days of a person that was new, or he was returning to work from a period of leave. How you gonna protect yourself? Prevention. First, drink cool water. 1 cup of cool water every 15 minutes, even if you're not thirsty. And also hydration the night before. I always recommend that to the employees. Hydrate the night before. Take breaks, and when you take a break, look for a cool area or shade. Dress for the heat, use hat, loose fitting clothing, breathable clothing, light colors. Watch out for each other. And this is why training is important. If you train your employees to recognize the symptoms, they can monitor themselves and they can monitor their coworkers. Personal protective equipment. Sometimes personal protective equipment is bulky and it can increase your sensitivity to a heat exposure. For the employers, develop a heat illness prevention plan. We have information in the OSHA website on how you can develop your heat illness prevention plan. So some of the things that you need there, well, information about heat illness symptoms, how they are going to respond, and how they are going to prevent it, monitoring protocols, acclimatization protocols, work and rest schedule, protocols for emergency and first aid, ensure proper hydration. For those employees working 2 hours or more exposed to the heat, also provide access to additional fluids that contain electrolytes. You can modify work schedules, you can reschedule your non-essential work, shift physical demanding work, or add more employees to finish in short period of time. So there are risk factors. There are occupational risk factors and there are personal risk factors. Occupational, if it is hot, humid, or warm, low fluid consumption, heavy physical activity, you are exposed directly to the sun, there's no air movement. Many of my inspections outdoors, when I was looking for the data that day, there was no air movement, 0. And the use of personal protective equipment or lack of available water, there's no water available for the employees. Personal risk factor, Some medical conditions, if you talk to your doctor, ask them how you can protect yourself from the heat illnesses. If you have certain medications, use alcohol or drugs, previous heat illnesses can make you more susceptible to another heat illness. Lower level of physical fitness or individual behaviors, like you don't drink much fluids. I'm including here 2 of the heat illnesses. Heat stroke is an emergency. Heat exhaustion, I'm gonna talk about the symptoms. Dizziness, headaches, sweaty skin, weakness, cramps, nausea, vomiting, fast heartbeat. For heat stroke, red hot, dry skin, high temperature, confusion, convulsion, fainting. This is part of the symptoms of a heat stroke: abnormal thinking or behavior, slurred speech, seizure, loss of consciousness. I have one, my first investigation, it was a roofer. And when I talked to the supervisor, I said, but you didn't notice the symptoms. And what he told me, well, I noticed he was speaking funny, but I didn't think much about it. He didn't know the employee well. It was his second day on the job, and he passed. So if there are symptoms, call 911 immediately, cool the worker with water or ice, stay with the worker until help arrives, give cool water if the person can drink, remove unnecessary clothing, move to a cooler area, water, ice, or fan, and do not leave him alone until medical care arrives. Symptoms can get worse and quickly, so when in doubt, call 911. We have some resources in the OSHA website and no information here. We have an initiative in May 24, and we have had it in previous year, the Dawn Friday. Basically, that day, we want the employers to meet with their employees and provide information about how they can protect themselves and talk about heat illnesses and symptoms so they can refresh any training that they have had in the past. OSHA have on-site consultation program. They can help small businesses and medium-sized businesses, and they can help them to create their safety and health program and to identify workplace hazards. OSHA have OSHA Training Institute for training. Each OSHA office has compliance assistant specialists. Call your local office and check. If you have any question, general information about OSHA standards or compliance assistant, call the compliance assistant specialist. That's what I do in the office of Jacksonville. These are some of the compliance assistant specialists in Region 4, but you can see there the CAS directory in the OSHA website. You can look for your jurisdiction, where you're working, in what state, and look for the office, and you can contact the compliance assistant specialist. And if you have any question, that's a OSHA phone number, the email of my office, and my email. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that really important information. And I know that heat is a big deal to everybody on this call and to farm workers across the board. I did want to highlight it's been a busy chat during your presentation. OSHA staff did put in a lot of resources related to heat and heat-related illnesses. Those are in English, and then later on in the chat, some resources in Spanish were also added. We can compile all these links for participants and share them with the slides as well. And then one thing I wanted to mention, we have a postcard that tells workers about rough water intake guidance and sources of electrolytes and food, and then how to monitor their urine. We only have that in 3 languages right now, but if folks want that in other languages or need it in other languages, I'm going to put my email in the chat, and we can see about getting that into more languages. All right, there's quite a few questions. Let me scroll up here. So first question is from Teresa, and it's why are the heat illness prevention standards not universal in all states? California has certain standards that other states do not. It's sad to hear on the news that other states don't provide mandated shade, water, and rest.
Yes, OSHA does not have a standard now. There is a proposal of rulemaking that it was published a few days ago. We are in the process. We are in the process of creating a standard. However, we have our national emphasis program. Every time we go to a job site that the heat index is above 80, we are going to ask the question to the employer. Are you providing water? Are you providing rest? Are you providing shade? What are you doing to protect your employees from the heat? And we also receive a list of workplaces that we can visit through that national emphasis program that we can visit those days. If your employer is not providing water, rest, shade, training, anything, and you are exposed to the heat, you can call OSHA and ask your questions for a possible complaint. I never push anybody to file a complaint. I say, it's your decision. This is what we require. This is what we are looking. And then is their decision if they want to file a complaint.
Thank you. And Sandy did post in the chat a link to the draft proposed national standard.
Yeah. It's in the process. It's moving.
It's moving. That's right. Another question is, how are physical inspections completed or scheduled by compliance officers?
The heat inspections. When we go to the job site, if we receive, for example, a complaint, we go there, we check sometimes with monitoring, we need to check if it is based on of an accident or a hospitalization that was in previous day. It could be that, yeah, we do the monitoring also, but we look for the data, weather data of that day. But it depends. If it is a complaint, probably we are going with our sensors to check how is the WBGT or heat index. We're going to check that also. And we are going to ask those questions of water, rest, and shade. What are you doing? What are you doing for your employees to be protected from the heat? And the inspection process is with the employer. We open an inspection with the employer. During that process of the walk around, we are going to talk to employees. As a wage and hour, our inspection, our complainants are confidential. We cannot reveal the source of any complaint. We need to tell the employer, yeah, we are here because of a complaint, or we are here because your workplace show up in one of our lists, or we are here because you reported a hospitalization. That we said, but we never are gonna say who filed a complaint with OSHA.
Okay, and I think we have time for two more questions. This one is from Sabrina. It's a little more technical, and she asked, doesn't ice for a shock victim cause more harm? In the recommendations, I think, for someone experiencing a heat-related illness.
In the OSHA website, what we mentioned is a water, lower the temperature. The most important is that you can lower the temperature of the employee. If the employee is and that's why you see that they are using water. But the idea is to lower the temperature of the employee when he is on a heat illness.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Let me see. Yeah, there is a good question here. It looks like we might want to go into it more in the breakouts, but I wanted to highlight it because it is an issue in a lot of states, and that's how can people who are undocumented and afraid to file a complaint, I guess, how could they be protected maybe? And this person, Maida, points out that especially in the state of Florida, given the recent legislation.
Okay. If you file a complaint with OSHA, it's anonymous. we don't reveal the source of the complaint to anybody. And even you, if you want to file a complaint, you can call OSHA, file the complaint, and you don't have to provide your name. Always is good because if you provide it, then we can contact you to provide information on what happened with that complaint. If somebody discriminate against an employee because file a complaint with OSHA, they think, oh, you file a complaint, you're fired. There's the whistleblower protection, but the employee has 30 days to file a whistleblower complaint. We have two types of complaints, safety and health and for whistleblower. But for the whistleblower, somebody took fire you because they say, oh no, you filed a complaint. You can file the whistleblower protection complaint.
Yeah, that's an important point because I think a lot of us on the ground who have helped people file OSHA complaints, especially in small businesses, even if OSHA doesn't disclose the name, the employer might know who filed it, just given the circumstances, especially if it's a small company.
Yeah, and I understand that. And sometimes when they call me, I'm not sure, it's only 2 employees. I say, hey, this is what is we require. I'm not gonna force you to file a complaint because I understand what you are telling me. These are the protections that you will have in case something happens. And it's their decision if they want to file a complaint.
Well, thank you. As a final follow-up, we're going to transition to breakout rooms, but somebody did mention DALE. I don't know if either of you want to comment about DALE. Which is the U visa protection, I believe, right? Yeah, thank you. Someone in here commented deferred action for labor enforcement. Does any DOL staff want to comment about that program?
Bethany, I'm not going to be able to really comment much on that particular program. I'm not as familiar with that. But when you're talking about our immigration programs, that's actually sent up to our region. So if there is someone who's a victim of a crime or is facing some sort of exploitation, feel free to contact the Corps locally for your wage and hour division. I know that there's some pretty stringent requirements as far as cooperation and things like that with investigation. And that's something that our regional individual would be able to give more advice on and provide more information. That's not usually handled at the local level, but we could definitely get you in touch with the person that you would need to talk to from wage and hour side. And I'll pop that in the chat in a second.
Thank you. That's great. I know that's a big issue among many advocates in the South. All right, let's go ahead and transition to the breakout rooms. These are regional.